mentioned earlier, we're beginning a new series on Thessalonians that are written by Paul. Some background notes in the green sheet, and in the newsletter there's fairly full notes. I'm not going to go through those in detail. And Ross, there should be a PowerPoint down there as well that we'll get to eventually, and there's a couple more slides rather than on the you've got. I really want to encourage you to read through the letter of Paul to the Thessalonian church. We're going to be studying both 1 and 2 Thessalonians over these next 8 weeks. And I want to encourage you to join a Life Together group if you're not already part of a group. And read the devotional notes. I'll be sending them out by email. I'm hoping to be able to record some of them as well, so you can have an MP3 file and listen to. You may get there, I'm not sure about that. But it's a great book that we can be learning together from. As a church as a whole, we'll be learning and growing as a community as we study this wonderful book, Paul, written to the church in Thessalonica. Paul was dramatically converted. He was a passionate persecutor of the church, and he became a full-on follower of Jesus. He was dramatically and completely converted. He was a passionate persecutor of Christians, became a full-on follower of Jesus. And you probably know the story. He was on his way to Damascus to arrest and throw Christians into prison to persecute them. And as he was going along, bright light thrown to the ground, voice from heaven, "Saul, Saul, why are you persecuting me?" "Lord, who are you?" "I am Jesus, whom you are persecuting. Get up, go to Damascus, and you'll be told what to do." A disciple called Ananias comes and he prays for Paul, scales fall off his eyes, he's baptized, and then he's told that he's got a mission to take the gospel to the non-Jewish people, to the Gentiles. And God also says to him through Jesus, "I'm going to show you how much you're going to be persecuted. You will suffer for the gospel, but many will come to know." And Paul went away perhaps for a couple of years and reflected and learned and studied, and then they were set apart for a mission to bring people out of darkness into light. Paul reflects when he was talking about his call, about how Jesus was sent as a light to the Gentiles, the non-Jewish people, to bring people out of darkness into a wonderful light. Paul knew the commission of Jesus was to make disciples of all nations, and he was called and commissioned and set apart to do that. He did it passionately as a follower of Jesus. And so we have today a letter written by Paul, a passionate follower of Jesus. And he did an initial missionary journey. Can I have that first slide, please, Ross? Around what's modern-day Turkey. And his first missionary journey was in this area. And he planted churches. He saw many people come to know the Lord. Established a well-known church, which is Ephesus here. And then he went back home again, spent a little bit of time at home, and then went out again on his second missionary journey. And this shows the second missionary journey. Started off here, Jerusalem, went up to Antioch, which is where a church was first called a church of the Christians there. His hometown was Tarsus. Went through this area, and Timothy, who we read about in this letter, comes from this particular area in Lystra. And Paul was in this area here. And he was praying and saying, "God, what should we be doing? Where should we be going?" Just as Ashley was saying to us last week about Philip listening and then responding to what the Spirit was saying. Paul was praying and asking and saying, "God, show us where to go. What should we be doing?" And funnily enough, the Spirit of God came to him and said, "Don't go here, don't go to that place." But there was a vision that he had. You read about it in Acts chapter 16. He had a vision of a man from Macedonia, in this part of the world over here. See Macedonia over there? He had this vision during the night, and this man was calling to him, come over and help us." And Paul, because he was a passionate, full-on follower of Jesus, he did what God called him to do. He immediately left that place here where he was. I think it was in Troas. He got on a ship and went across over here and up to Philippi. And you know the story in Acts 16 about being in Philippi, how he met a lady called Lydia, and she became a follower of Jesus. And then there was this girl who had a spirit of evil in her, a fortune teller. The spirit was thrown out, and Paul and his travelling companion Silas ended up in prison, whipped and beaten, thrown in prison. He finally was let out, and he went from Philippi here, down here to Thessalonica. Hard word to pronounce, that's the way I say it. The Thessalonians, or Thessalonica, is the name of the town. And so he is here. He's only there for a short period of time. I just want to read to you a little bit from Acts chapter 17 about what happened. He was only there for a short period of time. It talks about 3 weeks, but he may have been there for a little bit longer. It's not recorded. Let me read it to you. In Acts chapter 17, I'm reading from, in the church Bibles, it's on page 1012. I'm going to read briefly from Acts chapter 17. Here we go. When Paul and his companions, that's Silas and Timothy, had passed through Amphipolis and Apollonia, they came to Thessalonica, where there was a Jewish synagogue. As was his custom, Paul went into the synagogue, and on 3 Sabbath days he reasoned with them from the Scriptures, explaining and proving that the Messiah had to suffer and rise from the dead. This Jesus I'm proclaiming to you is the Messiah, he said. That was pretty powerful words when he was speaking to a Jewish audience in a synagogue, and he is saying and seeking to prove to them that Jesus is the long-awaited one, the Messiah. Some of the Jews were persuaded and joined Paul and Silas, as did a large number of God-fearing Greeks, and not a few prominent women. But other Jews were jealous, so they rounded up some bad characters from the marketplace, formed a mob, and started a riot in the city. They rushed to Jason's house in search of Paul and Silas in order to bring them out to the crowd. But when they did not find them, they dragged Jason and some of the other believers before the city officials, shouting, "These men who have caused trouble all over the world have now come here, and Jason has welcomed them into his house. They are all defying Caesar's decrees, saying that there is another king, one called Jesus." When they heard this, the crowd and the city officials were thrown into turmoil. Then they made Jason and the others post bond and let them go. As soon as it was night, the believers sent Paul and Silas away to Berea. I'm not going to read any more there, but what we find out if we read a bit further, that he was here in Thessalonica, went down to Berea, which I can't see there, but he ended up down in Athens, and he left he left Silas and Timothy in Berea. He went on to Athens. They joined him there. Then Paul went on to Corinth down here, and Paul probably was in Corinth for maybe a couple of years, a year and a half. While he was there, he wrote a letter back to the church in Thessalonica, which is what we have here this morning. I've given you a little bit of background, and I'll get you now, if you will, to turn with me to 1 Thessalonians. We'll read it in a moment. 1 Thessalonians chapter 1. But if I can have the next slide, please, Ross. One of the things that it's important for us to recognise is the background of our New Testament letters. Because in order for us to understand them well, we need to know what it was like then and there. Let me just give you a little bit more information. These Thessalonican Christians, the people from Thessalonians, were new believers. They were converted from a Greek pagan background. And they were converted in the midst of persecution because they faced opposition from the culture around them. Now, we in Australia probably don't understand this very well, but one of the challenges and one of the good things of having international people with us is that they help us understand more about culture. If an Australian was converted,